we're going to get started on our final farm finance conversation with Andy, person I know that talks about money in the most exciting and positive way possible. We did want to just get a sense for what experiences you have had with farm financing. So I'm going to launch a poll. And if you're having difficulty with it or opening it, don't worry. But just kind of see how everyone's feeling about this.
Do I need to stop the share for the poll to work?
No, I think it should pop up. So let's see.
There it
Folks,
is.
can you see it? Perfect. So just checking in about, what funding streams maybe you have already dealt with or applied for, or what are some obstacles that you experience in these types of processes. And one thing to just say out loud is that this can feel really intense. There's a lot of literacy around finances that can make us feel out of place. So
we're going to get you there.
Yeah, we're going to get you there. Be open to asking questions. Andy and I, just before y'all logged on, it takes like 3 to 5 times to walk through some of this stuff before it really clicks in. So ask away.
You guys, it took me being a banker for 4 years to be able to be real comfortable in this terminology. And even when I got comfortable with the terminology, the actual practice of it took me a little bit longer. So even if you're at the 101 level, you're doing pretty damn good. And we'll try and get you past there too.
We've got most folks answered. I'll give you just a couple more seconds to leave a thought or a note, and then we'll end this poll. All right. So if you feel like taking a peek, looks like quite a few folks in the room have applied and used grants. Some of us loans from banks, others kind of equal cost share or equity. Greatest farm finance obstacle, all people in the room say, I don't like debt, Andy.
Okay. Can I see that result? I can only see the
top.
First one.
I think you should be able to scroll.
I just got to scroll down. I'm not very smart. Okay, there it is.
There she is.
Got it.
All right. Well,
you guys, that's super interesting. It really is, especially the fact that there are more people on here that have had equity investment experiences than they've got loans from the FSA. That's really uncommon amongst a group of farmers.
Andy, take it away. Reminder to everyone that's joining us tonight to please use the chat or raise your hand if you have a question as we go along. We want to make sure that Andy has time to get through content, but we'll do our best to answer questions along the way where they fit, and if not, at the end of our session.
So hold on, I'm just trying to do a real quick screen cap of those results because that is interesting to me. We're going to hold on to those, and they are not connected to you, so there will be no
yeah, they're anonymous.
no identifiable stuff. So tonight, this is the 3rd iteration of the money conversation, you guys. And this is one of the things that we've kind of realized about FFI is that we're just trying to get people who are, they're very much about a lot of objectives, the triple bottom line, doing good for their community, for their environment, and then for their business as well. We're just trying to get folks comfortable with money and knowing that it's not completely evil and you can do good things with it. And it's okay to have a little bit yourself. So tonight, we're going to be talking about accessing the capital you need to grow. All right. And so the conversation is really going to be framed around 2 major things. And one is debt, conventional loans. And the second is everything else that is not debt and conventional loans. Okay. I think it's important for farmers to be able to understand what the process is around conventional debt, because that is the main tool that we use, but it's not the only thing out there, as our poll results indicate. And so in the second half, I'm going to talk about some non-bank options for getting into financing that doesn't require some of that conventional stuff. Grants will be part of that conversation. I am very open to talking about those. Me and Jim Gage have spent the last 4 days talking about the value-added producer grants, y'all. That's a kind of the top of the mountain as far as I'm concerned for a lot of people that are involved in groups like this. It's a $250,000 grant, and it is a heavy lift to get into. So we can talk about that a little bit later here too. All right, so where you've seen this slide out of me every time we've talked. What does a profitable business model include? And it's all these bullet points, right? We've talked about being defensively unique. What is it that we do differently and better than everybody, and then keep it as sort of part of our value proposition? Do we have enough demand? Do we have enough supply? Do we have the marketing communications that we need in order to get the message out there? But tonight is really about this last one: enough appropriate capital to fund growth. We've talked about enterprise budgets, right? We've talked about gross versus variable. We've talked about, gross profit versus net profit is what I meant to say. We've talked about the lean business model canvas, a really shorthand way to get your full business model laid out. Hopefully some people have availed yourself of this thing. We've talked about the big 3 financial statements, and we'll have some more conversation about why those are important today, but not in the depth that we had last time. We're going to talk about how to put them together and make them work for you. So tonight, the 2 big halves are bank financing. What are the types of loans you can get? What are the ways that the lending decision is going to get made? And 2, non-bank financing. What are some other ways to get into the capital that you need to grow? Most people, especially as indicated by that poll, 8 out of 9 folks, I don't like debt. Can we say a little bit more about that, please? Anybody who's willing to pipe up either in the chat or on the audio, just flesh that out for me a little bit, because it's a very common sentiment.
I'll jump in, Andy. For me personally, I already have a lot of student debt, and so piling on to the debt pile feels like the wrong choice, personally.
I feel you. Who else?
This is Ben. I'm not as scared of debt as much as I am the cash flow, part of it, making the payments. If I feel comfortable making the payments, not as scared of debt.
Got it. Excellent.
There is a comment in the chat that interest rates are so high right now.
Yeah. Yes, they are. And hopefully they're kind of at the peak of where they're going to be, at least in the near term. Everybody says that the Fed is going to pause on raising interest rates. And now, by the way, the Federal Reserve does not control the rate you've got on your operating loan, for example. But they do directly affect all of the benchmarks that do affect your operating loan. The bank has to buy money in order to make you your operating loan, unless they're doing it all out of deposits, which almost no banks are. So their cost of funds is affecting your cost of funds. And that's why everybody's talking about the Federal Reserve and what they're doing with loan rates. But yes, they're supposed to lower them by up to 3/4 of a point over the course of 2024. So everybody keep your fingers crossed. But even 3/4 of a point doesn't feel like much when your operating loan used to be at 4%. And now it's at 8 or 9 or 10. Like, ugh. Very good. Anybody else want to comment on that question?
I was going to add, like what said, I worry about having to make those payments. It may be great cash flow here, but not sure we have a lot of problems on the farm. All this, we can't make payments. I feel like I'm setting myself for failure with extra payments.
That is a fantastic point, Rebecca. We in agriculture have to deal with a fair amount of uncertainty. Surprise! And so as a result, when uncertainty results in hits to our cash flow, we go, oh crap. If I have a hit to my cash flow, how am I going to make that payment that's due this month, this quarter, the end of the year, whatever it is? Yeah, very, very good point. So what I want to do is kind of mention two things, debt and equity. And those are really the two kinds of capital that most businesses go after. Debt is loans primarily, right? Equity investment has somebody that, so debt is a contract to pay back borrowed funds, right, on a specific schedule using specific collateral as security. All right. And we talked about all of these different things in that slide that Christine sent you earlier. I'll show the terminology slide in a couple of minutes here too. So those are the paying back borrowed money according to contracted terms. Equity investment has to do with an outside entity buying a share of your farm business. It could be a percentage. It could be a number of shares if you're an LLC or a corporation. It could be a lot of different ways. And that is not a like set thing. It's like very individualized on every business's case. Like how much, what percentage are we selling for? How much? What kind of control and decision-making power does that offer that person? And frankly, farms get a little bit weird to equity investors. And this is why we live on our collateral, right? We live on the thing that's securing the debt. And so when they take collateral or when they take something back, they get us with it. And that's usually not something that they want. Also, our assets are super duper expensive, producing a relatively low margin product, even for many of us that are sort of in the value added biz. We tend to grow sort of incrementally and organically as opposed to like that logarithmic growth curve that you see on the big tech firms in Silicon Valley and things like that. That risk that Rebecca brought up, especially the weather risks and the market risks, we shoulder a lot of that. And even other parts of the value chain in which farmers are involved, they like to push the risk back on the farmer because for some reason we seem to stomach it a lot better than they do. Also, most farms contain quite a few enterprises, quite a few different pursuits, crops, livestock, custom farming, trucking, retailing, food manufacturing, all that stuff. And sometimes it's one entity, sometimes it's multiple entities. So it's hard to know what to invest in. And then last but not least, our accounting and financial reporting, I wrote different, and that's really code that like there's a large proportion of us that don't like to do it. So I would ascribe that dislike to two things. One, unfamiliarity, right? As soon as we get more familiar with a thing, we get better at doing it, we get more comfortable in it. Two is it's not the kind of work that we got into farming for. And we know that. But most of us who are kind of the true entrepreneur and we want to be managers as opposed to just producers start to realize that financial management side of things gets pretty essential to business management overall. Okay, here's that essential terminology. Christine sent this out earlier, just very quickly. When I say financing, I mean that with the broadest brush possible. It's any kind of funding you can get for your enterprise, up to and including putting your own personal cash into your farm. Equity, as opposed to the equity investor that we just talked about. So equity is an ownership position in something. And it's not just a certain share or a certain membership. You might have an equity position in your combine. If you have a loan against the combine and the bank has 50% of it and you hold 50% of that value, then you have an ownership position. You have 50% equity in that combine. Collateral, that's the assets that secures the debt. That's the thing that the bank gets to come to your farm and take back and try to sell in order to get themselves made whole if you default on your loan. And you know what? Banks don't want to do that, and we'll talk about why. A lien, L-I-E-N, is a legal claim on assets. Like if you have a lien against your farmland, that's the bank's claim for their loan that they've got. Chattels, that's an actual word. It's not just a mispronunciation of cattle or anything. Those are non-real estate assets. So real estate assets are ground and anything that's attached to that ground permanently, right? Buildings, grain setups, whatever. All the other stuff that you've got, your tractors, your livestock, your whatever else, those are your non-real estate assets or chattels. To default is to break your loan agreement, and a default does not necessarily mean that the banker is coming for you. One of the things that I'm going to emphasize over and over and over again during the course of this presentation is that more communication is better. And letting whoever is on the other end of your loan transaction know that there's a problem sooner rather than later is going to wind up with a better outcome. Last but not least, guarantee, spelled with a Y. I have no idea why. This is a promise from some third party. Most commonly in agriculture, it's the FSA, the Farm Services Agency. They will make a guarantee that says to the lender on a piece of paper that if this borrower defaults on a loan, they will make the bank whole up to 90%, 95%. Like it's pretty substantial. Other outfits do this as well. The SBA, the Small Business Administration, makes guarantees, and there's others too. So I just need you to be aware of those 6 or 7 pieces of terminology before we get started here. I will do my best not to run through acronyms that don't make any sense. And if I'm getting over anybody's head in bankery jargon, please let me know and I will fix it.
And Andy, can I ask a question?
Please.
Specifically with this terminology, these will exist in both your farm business and your personal finance world, right? So like, especially for like the non-real estate assets, that's where they might intersect and get a little bit even muddier.
So I would say that the non-real estate assets you've probably talked about with your insurance person, and they've referred to that as personal property or farm personal property, which is super weird. I'm watching Hannah jump up and down. This is kind of hilarious. Sorry, I got distracted there for a minute. She must be freezing over there doing jumping jacks. So when you hear your insurance agent talk about farm personal property, they're probably referring to the exact same stuff that the terminology chattels is referring to. It's the non-real estate assets. So yes, you probably have an insurance product that includes farm personal property, farm real estate, personal property, and personal real estate as well, or consumer real estate. So yes, very, very good clarification there. All of these things are general finance terms. They are not specific to farm, but I'd say that the word chattels in particular is probably, more commonly used in agriculture than elsewhere. The other thing that I want you to be really aware of is that the time when you need the capital the most, when the brown stuff is hitting the fan, that is absolutely the worst time to go and try and get into capital from another party, because that's absolutely the worst time on paper that you appear. I said that sentence completely out of order, but you know what I mean. You look bad on paper when you need emergency capital. You had a crop failure, your combine burned, like whatever it is went really, really wrong. And you're like, I need to buy a combine. I need to do this or that or the other thing. And it's September and I haven't gotten anything out of the field yet. And I don't have any cash. I better go get a loan. It's like, well, you look pretty crappy on paper right now. But if you've got an established lending relationship with the bank and they realize, hey, he or she is not going to be able to pay us back at the end of the year unless they got a combine to get the crops out of their field, they'll probably make the loan anyway, because it's a good business proposition for everybody. That's another point I'll make right now, and it's not written down anywhere because I don't want to have to defend it, but almost everything in commercial lending is negotiable. Almost everything. In consumer lending, when you're going to get a car loan, when you're going to get a mortgage, when you're going to do anything that's on the consumer side of things, there's usually a very rigid box that you have to fit into. In commercial and agricultural lending, that box is it's not quite as rigid. And if you can make the risk appear more attractive to the banker in some creative way, there's a chance that things still might work out well. Okay, enough said on that. More questions anytime, but don't try and wait until the brown stuff hits the fan before you know that you might need some emergency capital. You might need a loan, you might need a revolving line in order to finish planting your crop, in order to get into whatever. Make sure that you are thinking about a financial plan for the future. And the best way to do that, I'm going to scare you for a second, but it's going to get less scary the more times you see it. The best way to do that is have a continuously updated pro forma. What does that freaking mean, that word pro forma? I'm going to show you something. And it's something I built, and it's ugly, and no, I'm not going to email it to you because it is not ready for prime time. But I'm going to show it to you anyway. This thing here is what we at FFI call a pro forma. And this is it's super small, and I'm going to try and make it just a little bit bigger, but you almost need to be able to see the entire thing. It's an income statement on top of a cash flow statement on top of a balance sheet, all in one user interface, all in one little dashboard. It's big and mean and ugly looking, but it's not rocket surgery, I promise. The thing I want you to remember is that every single financial statement you produce as a business can be arranged in a column. And that's all this is. It's your financial statements arranged in a column. And it's done month by month by month by month. So right here, column H, this has your farm income statement arranged in a column. It's got all your different sales. It's got all your different expenses, all arranged in a column. This happens to have, this has accrual adjustments in it. And remember, we talked about accrual adjustments. They're fun, so you can more accurately represent your cash position with the inventories you have. But that's all just arranged in a column. And so you do that with your statement of cash flows, right? And we talked about that. Operating cash flows, investing cash flows, financing cash flows. That's all this is, arranged in a column. And your balance sheet. So current, intermediate, and long-term assets at a point in time, right? Because a balance sheet is a snapshot in time. And liabilities, short, intermediate, and long-term, arranged in a column. Okay, big fat hairy deal, right? Everything is arranged in a column, Andy. This is not that interesting and it's not that complicated. You're right, it's not. So you get all of the income and expenses and balance sheet entries that you do, you arrange them in a column, and then you go month by month so that you have a whole year from January to December, and then have the annualized numbers over here on the right. So these are predicted for the future. So when you hear me say the word pro forma, farm pro forma, it's got 1 year's worth of monthlies, 3 years worth of annualized of all those different entries of the 3 financial statements stacked on top of one another. That's all it is. It gets ugly looking and it gets intimidating because there's a lot of cells. And everybody thinks that every cell needs to have a freaking number, and it doesn't, I promise. But it's one of these tools that if you're ever, especially if you're ever going to get into equity investors, that people are going to be able to, people in the venture capital and angel investor type of world, this is the kind of thing that they will understand. So my second piece of advice after showing you this big, ugly, complicated, scary thing, is that you do not and should not be alone in preparing your own if you're going to do so. Engage someone who knows the ins and outs and terminology and jargon and BS associated with farm finance. And that could be me. That could be anyone from your small business development center. That could be SCORE. That could be your local CDFI that you work with. That could be whomever. Have a nerd in your corner that knows their finances and can help you put something like this together when you need it. The other thing I will say is that actually pulling one of these things together for yourself and for your farm is the best way to get familiar with the intricacies of how they work. It's so educational and frustrating and educational. All right. So that's a pro forma. When you hear me say pro forma, that's what I mean. A pro forma usually has a supporting document called sources and uses. All right. Again, a nerdy finance term. It's not actually as complicated as it looks. A sources and uses table has, let's see, it's all the things that you're going to do in a particular project. This particular project was expanding a dairy farm and building a cheese plant, a rotationally grazed organic dairy. The sources are where the funds to do all those things are coming from. So over here on the right, you can see the uses. We got to buy ground, we got to put in trees for silvopasture, mitigate stream bank, buy the critters, buy the plant, and then have some operating capital to do that stuff. Now, the crummy thing about banks is that they're not going to lend you 100% of what you need. They're not, because they want you to have some skin in the game. There's exceptions to that. The FSA will do a 100% land loan. We can talk about that. But most of the time, you're probably going to be in the 65 to 80% loan to value range. And that's what these numbers over here reflect. It's like, okay, if I need to buy that land for $300,000, I can probably get a mortgage for maybe $240 at best, at 80%. And so that maximum loan to value limitation always leaves, okay, I can get my hands on $970,000, but I need $1.25 million. How do I bridge that gap? And that's the bazillion-dollar question. And we'll talk about answering that over the course of the day today. All right, quickly, there's 3 types of loans available to farmers. They're general types. Is there a lot of exceptions to this rule? Sure. There's a ton of different loan products in the world, but they're all mostly going to fit into these categories. Short-term loans, around a year in duration, sometimes up to 2 years, usually used for operating capital. When I say operating capital, I mean the cash you need to use to put a crop in. Most of the time, these things are going to be secured by a UCC filing, the Uniform Commercial Code. The Secretary of State has a little piece of paper that says, all right, so-and-so bank has got a lien, a claim on the assets, especially the non-real estate assets, the chattels of Y borrower. Okay, so that's what that little piece of paper does, is it says, we're going to use your stuff as collateral to give you operating capital to get that crop put in, taken out, and sold. Intermediate term loans, those are the ones that are slightly longer, but usually not as long as a mortgage, right? So 2 up to about 10 years or so, maybe 15 in certain circumstances. But that's usually what we're going to use to buy machinery, trucks, breeding livestock. Those are often secured by the serial number on the truck, or excuse me, the VIN number on the truck, the serial number on the tractor or the Bobcat. There's no serial number on a cow. So that's usually when we use a UCC filing for those critters, and we might describe them specifically. The long-term loans, these are the mortgages. These are the things to get yourself into land or real estate improvements, right? If you're going to buy a barn, if you're going to put up a barn, if you're going to put up a grain setup, if you're going to put up a processing facility, if you're going to put up a retail store, you're probably going to have to touch your mortgage, because that piece of infrastructure is going to be permanently attached to the piece of ground that it's sitting on. Are there exceptions to this one too? Yeah. You can own a condo, which is real estate, and not own the ground underneath of it. Weird, right? But it does exist, and not very common in agriculture. All right. There's a ton of banks out there, and they all kind of look the same, right? They're all squat brown brick buildings in little towns spread around the upper Midwest. How do I figure out which one I should actually go to? It doesn't just have to be the one in your hometown. For the love of God, it's nothing sinful to interview multiple banks. Okay, I promise. Having worked in one at the time, I might have said that it was, but now I know darn well that we can pit people against one another, get them to compete for your business. The first way to make sure that you're going into the right type of institutions is make sure that if they have a web page, they should have something on there that says farm or agriculture or farm business or something, so that there's loans specific to operating, specific to real estate, and hopefully an existing relationship with the FSA or other concessionary capital providers like them, FSA, SBA, etc. If you have an existing relationship with a bank, they know you, they know your folks, you've lived in the same town for God knows how many generations, great, start there. They know you, and they know who they can come after if you do anything wrong. If you don't have an outfit like that in your hometown, that's okay. Just I would look and make sure that the bank specializes in agriculture, because trying to teach a banker who has no familiarity with farming about what you're going to do with your loan proceeds, it's a lot more work than it needs to be, especially if you can walk into somebody's office who gets it. Sometimes the lender, okay, there's two sides of this coin. Using a lender who's like the vice president of credit or whatever with your local bank is super cool, and they have a lot of decision-making authority, and they'll give you what you want, and they don't have to ask a lot of people for permission, and that's great. But if you're starting out as sort of a small fish, your VP of credit is going to be a little bit less motivated to take you on into their book of business, because they've been spending their entire career just trying to keep those big profitable customers and shed the little high effort customers to their younger bankers. So the young banker who's motivated to build their book of business is more likely to give the time and attention necessary for a small fish like us than somebody who might be the VP of credit in their bank. Just a little bit of inside baseball for the hierarchical crap that goes on. Last but not least, as I mentioned before, hopefully that bank has some partnerships with outside organizations, including farm services agencies, small business administration, economic development organizations, etc. Christine, I am not keeping up with the chat, so if you have anything that's popping in there that I need to address, please, please, please just go ahead and yell at me, okay?
We'll let you know. Folks are chiming in about banks that they like working with, so that's great. Yeah, and I think that's a really nice place to open up. If anyone wants to share like a good or positive or poor experience that they've had with a bank, maybe you could chime in or come off mute real quick and take a moment to share.
Flanagan is super cool in Central Illinois. They're one of their young lenders who specializes in alternative ag financing may have just gotten poached by Compeer. So the farm credit services offered by Compeer is a really good option as well. The Farm Credit of Illinois is also putting together an emerging markets team. There are lots of small banks who usually have a lender who is familiar with organic at the very least, if not some of the direct market type pursuits. Interviewing whoever you get on the horn with when you call up the bank is not going to be the right person, right? There's going to be a frontline person, and they're going to say, "Oh, who is it that you're looking to talk to?" And they may not even know. I was like, I want to talk to a credit officer who understands agriculture, and especially who understands alternative market agriculture. And that's going to be the person you want to find. It may not be the first person they point you to, but keep asking until you get to the right human being. Yes, there, Mark. So we've had the farm credit system seems to be very love and hate. It really does. a lot of the hate tends to come from a longer history. You know, they had some practices that happened in the farm crises in the 80s that put people off pretty badly. And we have long memories in agriculture. That's why we can stay pissed off at our siblings for years and years and years and years. So yeah, yes, you're right. Some of the younger folks do not remember, and hopefully they'll never have to have that experience either.
Andy, what would you suggest? Like, pretend you're blind dating, but it's for a banker.
Yeah.
What are the big no giveaways, or like a insightful question that would like give a pretty clear response without asking straight away, like, are you going to be a good fit for me?
Yeah, well, one of the things I'd want them to rattle off is some of their existing customers who use non-traditional markets. So I'd say, like, so who do you bank that isn't just selling to the elevator? Somebody that's selling to farmers market, somebody that's selling on contract to a food ingredients company, somebody that's, you know, doing any of that kind of stuff. That's a big question, because most of the time a banker gets educated about unconventional markets by having clients that sell into them. So that's going to be a great one. Otherwise, just asking about their sort of their pedigree, like, oh, did you come from farming? Have you had experience with some of these, you know, non-conventional types of approaches that people are doing? There's a difference between the bankers who pay real attention to agriculture and the bankers who do agriculture because they're assigned to. So asking them about some of their favorite types of customers or some of their favorite example projects might be a really good thing too. Cool. Cool. All right. Just a couple of things, process things that I want you to be aware of. People have heard about the 5 C's, or if you're recently engaged, it's a different set of C's, you know, and you're buying diamonds and whatnot. But like, I want to talk about these C's through the lens of how do we improve them, okay, if in case they're an issue for you. All right, so first and foremost, this is going to be the #1 thing that people are going to look at. I don't care how many folks say that character is the #1 C that they're going to look at. You can have fabulous character, but if you can't make a payment on that loan, which is what you're contracted to do, they're not going to lend to you. All right. So capacity, having the cash flow to make the loan payment when the loan payment is due is #1. All right. So they're going to evaluate that by looking at your personal income, your farm income, like aside from your personal income, and any non-cash expenses they can add back. Like if they get a Schedule F and they see there's a whole boatload of depreciation on there, they know that that's not a cash expense and they're gonna add it back. So then they're going to get that total pool of available capital, right, and that available cash flow, and then they're going to subtract out, what does it cost you to live in a typical year? What is your tax burden in a typical year? How many loans to what kind of total are you currently paying right now? So if the pluses are bigger than the minuses, that means you might still have some income available to service debt. And they don't want you to get down to zero either. If you have $1,000 and you're already making $800 worth of payments, they're not going to lend you another $200 because that's going to put you at zero. They want you to have some wiggle room to live on. All right. If you need a credit enhancement on this because you do not have adequate cash flow to make the payments, you remember when you were 16, you're trying to get in your first vehicle, have a cosigner from your folks or your uncle or whomever. Having a cosigner or a guarantor still exists, and it's still a thing you can do in commercial credit. You can get a personal guarantee on commercial credit from, you know, somebody else that might be related or might be a mentor or somebody that trusts you inherently. Be aware that if they're on the dotted line, that they're just as responsible. And if things go sideways and you can't pay, they're going to come after that other person. So it's not a risk-free proposition. Also, try not to have a payment come up before you've got cash flow from the project. If you're doing a thing that's not going to produce cash flow until 6 months down the road, like, put in a crop, but, you know, any other project like that too, ask for an interest-only period where you do not have a payment. Loans are not only structured as having a once-a-month installment payment. That's not by far the only way that it can be done. It can be once a quarter, it can be once a year, it can be a monthly payment that's small and then an annual payment that's like a balloon. I mean, there's a lot of ways to structure it. And as long as the bank's computer system can handle it, you should be allowed in order to make that structure work for you. Enhancement, real quick. Whoops, I went too far. There. No, I didn't. There we go. Okay. Second C, capital, skin in the game. The picture is the old trite truism, right? At breakfast, the chicken's involved, but the pig's committed, right? And so they want you to be the pig. They want you to have some skin in the game, meaning they want you to have some of your own resources going into whatever the transaction is that you're looking for a loan for. They don't want it to just be the bank's money at risk. So that's why there's those LTV maximums, the loan to value maximums. If they're going to give you 75% of the $1,000 you're asking for, that means you need to come up with the other $2,500 yourself. So it cannot just be the bank's money at risk. If you need an enhancement here because you don't have a lot of cash to put down, there's a couple ways that you can do it. You can use an FSA guarantee. The Farm Services Agency is a great place and a familiar place for agricultural borrowers to get a guarantee for usually 90%, beginning farmers up to 95% of the outstanding principal if the borrower goes into default. That's a big deal. And there are other guarantees, like I mentioned, from the SBA and other places, but the FSA is the most common. From a collateral standpoint, that's the third C. The bank, if you default and things just cannot get resolved in any other way, the bank can take back collateral, try and sell it, and get made whole on the outstanding principal balance of your loan. They don't want to do this. I mean, I cannot emphasize this enough. Going into default and having the bank come back for your collateral is a lose-lose-lose situation for just about everybody involved. Except for that person who winds up buying that thing from the bank, because they can usually get it on a bit of a fire sale. So the bank doesn't want your collateral, they want your interest payment, right? That's the thing that allows them to be profitable and keep the lights on. And if they take your collateral, that means you generally have one less thing than what you need to be able to farm. And so your business prospects are reduced by taking your collateral, and the prospects of having successful lending in the future is diminished. So there are certain circumstances where they would rather take a bit of collateral that's familiar to them and have enough collateral coverage that they know that they're going to get made whole. And so what I mean by that, so some of us are getting into something that's unusual, right? And mostly it's from a market standpoint for the folks on the call right now, but imagine somebody who's going into aquaponics, for example. Aquaponics production system has a lot of pumps and hoses and gutters and fish poop, right? Like there, and some plants too that may or may not be at maturity. And so all of those things produce a really nice product, but individually by themselves, they don't really have much collateral value. If you're going to expect a great big old loan, and the thing that you want to put up is your aquaponic system, which is a bunch of hoses and gutters in your basement or in your outbuilding or wherever it is, the banker might not find that super attractive. But let's say you got a pickup that's paid for, right? Bought and paid for. I think that a banker, especially an ag banker, is going to be a lot more familiar with selling a pickup than they are with a bunch of tubes and gutters and hoses and valves. So if you want to have a greater prospect of getting that aquaponics loan, maybe you can put up something other than the fish in the aquaponics setup as collateral. There are lenders who will not say no due to lack of collateral. That's mainly the SBA. They are designed for small businesses to be able to get the capital they need to grow and prosper. That being said, they will come after every other bit of collateral you might have available up to and including the equity in your home. So usually you're going to want to avoid that situation in most circumstances where people are trying to separate the farm from the personal from a business standpoint.
Can I pause with a question, Andy?
Please.
We have one in the chat, and maybe it'll be answered in the last two C's, but why would FSA or SBA or anyone guarantee a loan? Like, what's in it for them? Especially in these more early years of farming business risk.
That's a really great question. It's a very interesting question because it's not really something that's in it for them. That's why they were formed. The feds put together the FSA in order to get farmers into capital, especially farmers that were having a hard time getting capital from conventional sources. And so the making of the loan or the making of the guarantee through FSA is the objective. They want to use their tax dollars in order to get more farmers on the land, well capitalized, likely to succeed. So that's why they do it. What's in it for them? Do they make huge amounts of interest? No. Do they make huge amounts of, compensation and salary? No. They're government muckety mucks like myself. So it's really because that's what they were designed to do. Really good question. It's a really good question. I'm glad you asked that because I had to pause for a second and think about it too. What is in it for them? More farmers on the land succeeding.
Thank you, Morgan. Yeah.
Yeah, great question. Just to get these last ones through quickly, fourth C is character, right? We mentioned it. It is important. Especially if you're going to a bank that has known your family for multiple generations, they're going to look at your character and your folks' character and your grandfolks' character and all that kind of stuff. It's not just a credit score, right? They're going to look at your full being. That being said, if you're going to somebody who doesn't know you like that, yeah, they're going to look at your credit report. It's not just the score, especially when you're applying for commercial or agricultural credit. The score is kind of the least of it. Usually, they're going to look more into your past credit performance. Do you have defaults? Do you have late pays? Do you have debt out there that you haven't reported to the banker? All those things are going to be potential red flags. A low credit score will be a potential red flag too, but oftentimes that may or may not actually be factored into the loan decision algorithm. If you need to enhance that, do go to annualcreditreport.com, check for errors, use Credit Karma or whomever that you use to check that stuff on a regular basis, and especially pay down the revolving debt. If you've got credit card debt, if you've got retailer cards, if you've got any of those things that are kind of consumer debt that could be called in its entirety at any point in time, that's going to make your working capital look crappy. It's going to make so cash. Okay, let me say this correctly. Current assets minus current liabilities is going to be your working capital, and so if your current liabilities looks inflated because you have credit card balances and the entire credit card balance is always there in the current liabilities, we talked about that last time, getting that revolving debt paid down makes it look like you've got more cash available to meet your near-term obligations. Last but not least, conditions. And conditions can really mean two things. Like, is there a lot of conditions on approval, right? Do you have to go through an appraisal? Do you have to go through private mortgage insurance? Do you have to go through a title company? Do you have to go, like, there's steps that are involved in getting a loan to be secured and perfected. But it could also be that, we just had a global pandemic and maybe opening up that movie theater doesn't sound like a great idea right now, right? They're going to look at the macroeconomic conditions that the region and the country is facing. And if there's something that really makes this look bad, they might say no, and they're within their rights to do so. All right, I'm not going to talk about this because it's going to take too long. I want to talk about alternative financing in our last half hour because I see that there's 30 minutes left. Any questions that popped up before I switch to the unbanked type of stuff, Christine? Nope. Okay.
I think we're good on questions for now, but folks keep sending them through.
Yep. Or just interrupt me, please, for the love of God. Stop. I could stop talking. I've been talking all freaking day. It's one of my skills, right? Alternative financing is something that you can consider. Most of the time, people are considering non-bank financing because A, they might not be bankable yet. Very new farmers, very little credit history, not much collateral, etc. If you have a higher risk credit profile, so for example, you got a whole boatload of student loans and not a whole lot of assets. I've been there. And in that circumstance, you look like you have a pretty low net worth. Maybe you got that aquaponics operation with the unfamiliar collateral. Maybe you had a bankruptcy within the space of the last 7 years. That's how long it hangs on there. Or the most common one down here at the bottom, because you can't bridge that gap. You don't have the cash for that initial 25% or 20% or whatever it is that you need to put on the barrelhead in order to get into that loan. So the cautionary thing that I'm going to throw out there right up front before we talk about a couple of these options is just because you can get more credit doesn't mean you should. There's a lot of ways to get into lent money, you guys. And they're not all going to be doing the same level of due diligence that a conventional bank would do in order to make sure that you can actually pay those obligations back. So it's something to keep in mind. The other thing I want you to keep in mind is this third bullet point is just because bank number one turns you down, it doesn't mean the second bank will. So ask why. Like, what is it about my credit profile that made you guys say no? And if they're like, well, we don't understand, food grade grains. It's like, okay, I'm gonna go talk to somebody at Flanagan or Farm Credit or whomever. That's fine too. So get a good reason. And sometimes the reason is going to be a little bit less subjective than that too. And maybe it's something that you can correct. So people talk about bootstrapping all the time. It's annoying. But basically it's the way that you put your own savings into it, or you get your friends and family to put something up for you, or you have an egg farm and you hold a breakfast burrito fundraiser or something like that. I don't know who would do something like that. But it's basically the old silly thing of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. And I don't even like to say it because it doesn't make any sense. But there are some real values to not being having an obligation to somebody else. It's lovely to be your own bank if you can. And if you were a anesthesiologist in a previous life and you got a great big old, nest egg somewhere, you can make a loan to yourself. Form the farm as an entity, be the bank to the farm, lend the farm some money at a particular interest rate. And as long as the farm does what it's supposed to do, it can pay you back with interest. So you can make some personal money on farm income. And you can write that interest off as an expense on the farm. Neat, huh? But that requires the whole having been an anesthesiologist thing. So there is some limitations on accumulated wealth. Those informal loans from yourself or from your folks or from your rich Uncle Charlie or whatever aren't necessarily going to build your credit. No one's reporting to credit agencies when you're in a situation like that. And like we in agriculture so often do, we are mixing business and family relationships in those circumstances. And that's not always perfect, as we well know. For those of us who have been in business with family, it's not always perfect. That being said, especially around mixing business and family, seller financing is a really, really important tool in the toolbox, especially for beginning farmers. And that's basically when the owners of an asset acts as the bank, right? I bought my present real estate, the farm that I am on, from my dad using seller financing. He acted like my bank for the first few years. I made payments to him. We memorialized the loan at the county courthouse, the whole 9 yards, paid him interest, all that stuff. And then as I got him paid down and I got into an equity position, and mortgage rates went to like 0 a few years back. It's not right now, but it was a few years back. I don't remember when it was. I had COVID right before I was supposed to close on it, so that was probably 2020. I got like a 2.5% rate, which was less interest than I was paying my old man at the time. So it's like, hey, Dad, is it time to graduate to conventional financing? He's like, yeah, that sounds good. So it's a really useful opportunity to get into high dollar assets when you don't have cash to put down and you're not yet bankable. Generally, these are really flexible. The terms are favorable to the buyer. And believe it or not, a contract like this between parent, child, uncle, non-related party, doesn't matter. Seller financing like that can be guaranteed by the FSA. They don't have people ask for that very often because there's generally a trust relationship there already, but it's a possibility. And I see them utilizing it more in the future as people who are trying to get into farmland are having to do so using unrelated parties.
Andy, is it common for people in that relationship to do what you did and memorialize their loan? I've never used that term before, so excuse me if I use it.
No, please, it's a stupid term. I learned it from my banker colleagues back in the day. I don't know how common it is. I think it should be almost 100% common, because even in these trust relationships, stuff goes sideways sometimes. And it's really nice to have thought through what happens when something goes sideways. This is for a lease, for a loan, for a sales agreement, for any other kind of contract between parties that you're in business with. It's really wise to have some of those what ifs thought through and written down on paper. Is it 100%, Hannah? Absolutely not. Is it even close to that? I'm not sure. I'm a firm believer in the 80-20 rule, but I don't know if it'd be 80% of them are written down or 20%. I'm unfortunately going to guess it's more like 20% written down. Limitations on this: how trusting is that relationship right now? The ownership technically may not actually confer to you until you have made the final payment. So if you default on a seller financing loan, they might just get the thing back and you haven't earned any equity in that, unless you have written down how you're going to earn equity in the contract and memorialize that at the courthouse or wherever else. Okay, this is very common for family transfers of land and also for the next generation buying into the operating assets of a farm, like the machinery and equipment. Hannah and Ben are coming out for burritos. That's great. Yeah. All right, I hear you. You're not the first one. Dealer financing is another thing, and you can get financing at the dealer of almost anything. You can get a financing for a lawnmower, you guys, or a snow machine or snowmobile, which however north you are. You can get financing for freaking anything from the dealer, and they're oftentimes through companies like Ag Direct or Sheffield or some of these other outfits that are doing secondary market financing for equipment dealerships. And it gets more and more common because things are getting higher and higher dollar. It's very easy to spend $15,000 on a freaking lawnmower, you guys. I don't have a vehicle worth that much. So they make these things available because they want folks to get into higher dollar pieces of equipment. And they're usually pretty competitive with the bank. The bad side of this is that it's usually going to be a decision made based entirely on the credit score. So if you got a good credit score, you can get yourself in over your head very, very quickly. Yeah, I'm going to buy that $1 million combine and I'm going to finance it through Ag Direct, and I'm going to get a 15-year loan, and my annual payment is $100,000 frickin' dollars. You guys, can you make that on the operation that you're doing? Maybe, maybe not. But you should know what you have the capacity to repay. And if you don't know, work with a trusted advisor like a tax accountant or a banker or whomever to help you figure some of that out. Related note, as equipment expenses get higher and higher and higher, the big ticket items are oftentimes available for capital leasing. This is an interesting tool. There's a lot of things that can be leased as opposed to just bought. And this can include real estate improvements. I'm familiar with a cheesemaker who got a lease to build a cheese aging cave on their farm. It's like, how the hell do you lease that? Well, they had to do a lot of fancy paperwork. But such a thing is possible. And what that allows you to do is get into a big ticket item with little or no money down, make lease payments for a contracted number of years, and have that lease payment then transform into equity at the end of the leasing period. It's not 100% of your payment, right? They're going to build in an interest rate that's even better than what a loan would be because this is higher risk. But it's a way to get into an equity position, an ownership position on that big ticket item, and then eventually graduate into conventional financing. It takes longer to get into ownership of that thing, but it's a way to get into it in the first place when you really, really need it. Last but not least, I've mentioned FSA. No, this isn't last. I've got one or two more after this. We've still got time. Okay. We talked about FSA a number of different times, and they really are in it for your best interest. Now, I say that, but just like any other outfit that's operated by human beings, there's a certain amount of personality that goes into it. There's a certain amount of subjectivity that goes into it. They're all operating according to the same rule book. But some FSA loan managers are really flexible, really creative. Some are sticks in the mud. So this is a purpose-built organization for getting farmers into financing. Usually their rates are lower than conventional, but they're not free. I'll show you some of those in just a couple of minutes here. They do have joint financing programs so they can work in tandem with a commercial bank, which tends to work really good because then nobody's got all the risk, right? It's being shared between multiple organizations. It is got the FSA has fewer human beings than all of the banks in your local area, right? There's just not as many people to service the loan demand. So as a result, sometimes the decision-making procedures can be a little bit slower. That depends on the time of year, that depends on your county of residence, it depends on a lot of things, but it does tend to be slower, and it tends to be very by the book. You have to fit in the box. You have to be a square peg in a square hole. Whatever silly metaphor you guys want to use, it's got to fit. And so working with somebody like myself or SBDC who's got some familiarity with what's inside that black box tends to be useful as well. But that being said, if you cannot get into conventional financing, the FSA is a really useful option. Are they going to be your only financial relationship? Maybe at first, but not for your entire farming career. There's things that they're really useful for, and there's things that they're slightly less useful for, and we can talk about that. So here's an old slide, and I'm putting up an old slide on purpose to show you guys a progression of things. They've got different programs through the FSA. Most people have heard about ownership loans and operating loans. Ownership is buying real estate. Operating is anything else. Why they use those pieces of terminology, I have no idea, but they're very specific to FSA. And look at these really nice low rates. This slide is from 2020, you guys. So this is what's been happening. They're still the cheapest rates on the block, but they're not in the ones and twos anymore. As a matter of fact, this one that you know, of course, is going to make me bite my tongue is still in the ones, the farm ownership down payment loan. This is the first time I've ever seen that over 1.5 since I started watching that in like 2017. So there are things moving according to loan rates, and the FSA realizes that they can't give it away. By the way, farm ownership down payment, that's what we used to call the 545.50 loan. And what that means is that you put in 5%, the FSA puts in 45%, and a conventional financial institution puts in 50%. That risk is very spread. You still have some skin in the game. The FSAs know it's going to be over 20 years. The banks can be over up to 30 years. And it's going to have a 1.875 interest rate on the 45% that the bank put, or excuse me, that the FSA put in, and a regular interest rate for the bank's half of things. So it's a blended interest rate prospect. It's not going to be 1.875 on the whole thing. If you get into a direct farm ownership loan for land up to 600,000 and change, you can get that whole amount for 5.875. That's a really attractive rate for the greater marketplace right now. It's still not nothing. But yeah, it's one of those things that you can do. The thing that's getting scary is how little land $600,000 will buy nowadays.
Just so
Right.
you know, Andy, we've got 15 minutes.
I've got 5 more minutes of slides and then we'll open it up. All right. So a thing that's starting to become more common on our agricultural landscape is, I don't know what to call them, so I call them unbanks. They're these mission-driven organizations that are designed to get sustainable, regenerative, organic, alternative, and other kinds of non-traditional farmers out there on the landscape, well-capitalized and successful. They tend to be a high-touch relationship. You're doing a lot of communicating. You tend to have very flexible terms. If something goes wrong, they'll work with you. So will conventional banks, by the way, but these folks advertise it. The thing that's funny about them is that they're new. They don't have really long track records. They've been around for 5, 6, 7 years for some of the oldest ones like Mad Ag and Iroquois Valley and all those. Dirt Capital has been around for a while too. And there's new ones coming online. Oftentimes you have to be organic certified, not always. It depends on the organization. The funny thing is that usually they're raising money in order to relend. And so the amount of loans that they can make is directly connected to their success at fundraising. So sometimes they have a very limited pool of loans that they can make. So don't be surprised if you contact one of these folks and the well is sort of dry for the year. It can happen. It can happen with the FSA too, by the way. I think this is my last but not least. Grants are out there. And they're out there more right now than they have been ever in recent memory. They're competitive. Everybody wants them. And anybody who calls it free money isn't really, they haven't done the administration of a grant and how not free and time consuming that actually is. So grants are awesome. I've gotten a grant with my little farm. We got $12,000 from the Frontera Farmer Fund. We bought a building on skids and converted it into an egg processing facility. We are in there not quite daily, but a lot. And it's really helped our farm grow. Like it a lot. But the grants have specific objectives. They are very seldom going to buy you capitalized infrastructure and equipment. Despite the fact that I got a little shed, there's very few grants that are going to buy anything that's over $5,000. Some won't even go over $1,000. The only piece of equipment they might buy you is an iPad or a laptop. So really, you got to be thinking about operating capital needs. You got to be thinking about research, development, and outreach needs. You got to be thinking about some of these other purposes that meet the grant maker's objectives. And you got to be prepared to follow the directions. Even the biggest, heftiest honker out there, the value-added producer grant, which is linked down here at the bottom, that has a toolkit that's associated with it that tells you exactly how to write the thing. Well, no. It tells you exactly what you are required to write. It doesn't tell you how to write the thing from a finesse standpoint. The last thing to be cognizant of, more and more grants are requiring cost reimbursement. So what that means is you have to front load the funds. You have to do the initial expenditure and then apply for reimbursement of those monies. And that takes a little time. It also takes some capacity. So if you are getting into a big grant that's going to require a lot of cash flow, you might want to get yourself into a credit facility, like a revolving line, through a conventional or unconventional financial operation that will allow you to do some of those upfront expenditures. I know Compeer has made loans against grant awards. I know Foodshed Capital has made revolving loans against grant awards. So they are out there. They do exist both in the conventional financial world and in the unbanked world. All right, I gotta stop, I think, but so this is just the last exhibit as to how that person from the sources and uses table initially got into the rest of that money in order to make themselves possible to get into that whole project. Remember, last time we had to stop about here and we had a big gap of about $300,000. Well, they got a conservation payment for phosphorus mitigation that exists in Wisconsin right now. A little cost share from Equip, sold some carbon credits to either Indigo Ag or Agoro or one of those other outfits that's actually buying them right now, and then tapped into their home equity a little bit. And that got them into that gap bridging amount of funding that got them into the whole project. So you got to get creative. You got to know about some of these other sources in order to make sure that you have enough cash on the barrelhead to actually complete the project. There's nothing worse than a big project that you're trying to complete that only gets to 80%. At the end of these slides, and I'm not going to go through each and every one of them, there's 3 slides worth of matrix that show a typical use, a typical amount, and a source that might be useful for it. So this is a resource for you to use in the future once you have these slides in hand about, okay, I need 10 grand in order to get into a used tractor. Maybe I should do a Kickstarter. I need $10 million in order to build a giant food manufacturing plant. Okay, maybe we need to start thinking about equity investment. So it's just going to be a back of the envelope reference for sources of funds on the sizes and projects that you might be considering for your farm operation. This is all of my contact information. This is the rest of the people in my shop. Brad does food brands and consumer packaged goods. Sarah does food systems work. And this is where we keep all of our evergreen educational materials at edible-alpha.org. It's 5:23 and I'm stopping.
Crushed it.
Woo! I got through it. Thank you
Yeah.
guys, by the way, for your perseverance in listening to me talk quickly and in banky jargon about stuff. I can't wait for a good conversation to follow in these like 7+ minutes that we've got available to us, and I'll stick around longer too.
Yeah. So I'm going to drop a handful of things in the chat, specifically, 1, upcoming opportunities to continue these conversations with Food Finance Institute. If you have questions or are in need of like financial assistance to access the programs that FFI does, reach out to me and we can coordinate that. And then, yeah, I would say just free for all. Batter Andy with questions about.
That number that's on the slides goes to the exact same little phone as the number that Christine put in the chat. It all gets forwarded to my pocket, and I do really good answering my phone, and I do sort of okay in answering my email, as Christine well knows.
We all have our perfect preference, so it's good.
What can we talk about? What can help you guys out on this access to capital question, especially in the types of non-conventional operations that you've got going on?
Yeah, and this is an invitation to come off mute, speak about maybe something you're navigating or thinking about navigating.
My dad has a saying, Christine, it's dazzle him with your brilliance or baffle him with your BS. And so I don't know which I did.
There's a soaking process. This exists.
Alti
I
have
have
a question.
Sure.
Oh, Meg, go for it.
Oh,
Go
okay.
for it.
Well, so I didn't see the very beginning of your presentation, so I apologize. I saw the last half. But I saw that you said that a lot of those grants are not for equipment or infrastructure. So do you have any suggestions? Like I'm looking to try to build a building that would be a drying building, like a building where I would actually dry herbs and grains and stuff. There's some plans that I've found, and I've toured some farms that have them, but you have to kind of build them. They're like a new phenomenon. So I'm just wondering, can you imagine anything that, like, especially if it's a type of a agricultural building that is like really non-traditional? Like I'm gonna buy probably just gonna buy like an Amish built building or a Menard shed, and then I'm gonna just build the whole thing out, and I have to buy like an industrial blower fan, and then line the sides of it with like mesh, food grade mesh that's built out, so they're like trays for drying herbs or grains or different things. So
Yep.
can you think of,
Okay, so let me turn your question just on its head a little bit, and let me tell you why too. So you've stumbled into the thing that's absolutely hardest to get you into from a grant standpoint or from a lending standpoint. Lending for Oh, sweet. I have to take my kid the guitar in 3 minutes, just so y'all know. All right.
That's important.
No, I'll take both of them. Right?
I'll go get Ava with.
This is what we needed to do on a Zoom call, right? Sorry, you guys. Yes, I will run out the door with Alex in a few moments here. Okay. So Meg, getting into a building is really, really difficult, especially without touching your mortgage. So the thing that I want you to flip on its head just a little bit is think about the entire project for the drying facility. It's got the building, but it's also got some operating capital. You need to buy inventory, you need to buy packaging, you need to pay some staff, some time, you need to do all of these other things that would eventually come out of pocket.
Okay.
So if you can get a grant to cover some of those out of pocket type of costs, you can save your cash flows to get into some of those more capitalized infrastructure type of things, which tend to be easier to get a loan for than sort of the real operating capital turning over quickly cash type of needs. So I want everybody to think about the money they can save by getting a grant to pay for some of their day-to-day operational stuff, and then use that money that they can put away in order to get into the capitalized infrastructure, the equipment, the pole barn, the whatever else.
Because you're saying a grant would cover the operating costs.
It can. They're super situation specific. I've been talking about the value-added producer grants all week this week, and they are specifically a federal grant opportunity that covers operating money. They want to cover people. They want to cover toll processing. They want to cover packaging materials. They want to cover distribution costs. They do not want to pay for a building. Okay. So by flipping that over, you might create some cash flow that you didn't think about otherwise, because it doesn't have to come out of your pocket, and that can go towards the capital item.
Yeah, and just to add, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, but like a lot of grants for infrastructure or equipment are designated towards specific parts of the food supply chain. So for example, like the rural infrastructure grants that are appearing right now in a state-by-state availability wants you to be focused on post-harvest processing. So if you could find a more traditional lender for a building, then you could find a grant, leverage that against the building that you just put up to fill it in with the equipment that you need for post-processing. And so they kind of like fill into these specific nooks. And Andy, is that wrong? or close.
Yeah, it is so unpredictable right now because there's just so many different new grant programs that have appeared during and after COVID, because COVID elucidated all these vulnerabilities that I don't think we really knew that we had in the food system. You know, so we see a lot of stuff for meat processing infrastructure. We see a lot of stuff for fresh produce distribution. Like, if you're in one of those realms that has a lot of federal funds going towards it, you might be a square peg in a square hole, but you got to keep your ear to the ground.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
That's helpful. Mhm.
Andy, if
You guys,
need
I'm
to take,
so sorry. I
Let's
didn't
go.
realize I didn't have past
Oh,
5.
it's important.
You're
Music
great.
is important. It's
Yeah.
okay. Don't worry about it. Yes.
Let us maintain boundaries on our life. It's 5:31. Everyone, thank you so much for being here. And Andy, thank you so much as always.
If you
There's
guys want
many
to
of-
work more in
Yep.
this topic area, reach out and we will find a way that we can do it. Okay.
Yep, absolutely. There's ways to continue this conversation. So thank you. Thank you. I'll stay on for a few minutes for folks that have additional questions or needs, but have a great night.
Appreciate you all. Talk again soon.
Appreciate you, Andy.